The flashing red and blue lights dance across the wet asphalt, screaming chaos under the dim glow of a street lamp, as a black woman in dark scrubs her ID badge swinging from a lanyard that reads, Dr. Maya Jefferson, Trauma Surgeon, stands with her hands raised, rain soaking through her curly hair and into the collar of her coat, breath shuddering in the cold night air as a police officer yells, "Don't move. Get on the ground," despite the calmness in her voice as she says, "I'm a doctor. I just left the hospital, but they don't hear her. Or perhaps they don't care, because all they see is a black woman in a nice car in the wrong neighborhood, at the wrong hour, and the moment one of them forces her down to her knees, shoving her shoulder into the concrete as her stethoscope clatters from her pocket and rolls into the gutter. She realizes this isn't about protocol. This is about power, and the rain blurs the red on her scraped palm as she blinks away the sting of both water and humiliation, while people from nearby apartments peek through curtains, watching silent afraid as two white officers handcuff her next to her own vehicle, never once checking the credentials hanging just inches from her chest, because they've already decided who she is. Until now, she'd spent her entire life building something that could not be denied. But in this moment, none of it matters. Not the sleepless nights in residency, not the degrees from Johns Hopkins, not the lives she's stitched back together with trembling hands, because all they see is her skin, her clothes, and a location that, in their eyes, she does not belong to. And it's only when one of them rifles through her purse to find a wallet, shaking his head, muttering, "What kind of scam is this?" that her voice breaks trembling and fierce. "My license is in their state medical board you can call," but her words are lost under their laughter, and the one holding her down chuckles. "Yeah, sure, lady, maybe after we book you." And in that moment, she is not a healer, not a respected surgeon, not a human being. She is a suspect, a threat, and even as they search her vehicle without cause, dragging out her gym bag, her Tupperware containers from last week's lunches, there's a storm building in her chest, something that tastes like grief and fire, because Maya Jefferson has worked every day of her life to never be this woman, to be unassailable, undeniable. But all that armor means nothing in the hands of men who never intended to look beyond her skin. Then, just as one of them opens the door to shove her into the back of the squad car, the police radio on the belt of the younger officer squawks frantically, "All units emergency at Franklin Plaza. Multiple injuries, stabbing. Reported requesting any trained medical personnel on site. Immediately repeat any trained medical assistance." And for a moment, everything freezes. The officer glances at his partner, then at Maya, then back to the radio. "That's just 3 blocks from here," he says, and the other one curses under his breath. Tension suddenly thick between them, because they now realize what they had not bothered to confirm. Dr. Maya Jefferson is not just a doctor. She's a trauma surgeon, and she knows exactly what that call means. The minutes between life and death ticking away like blood spilling onto tile. And she sees it in their eyes, the hesitation, the dawning recognition. And she doesn't wait, jerking her shoulder back despite the cuffs. Her voice sharp and commanding. "Now, get these off me. I need to go now." And for a moment pride and procedure war in their faces, but duty and desperation win out. And one of them fumbles with the key, unlocking her wrists with trembling fingers, as if realizing too late the cost of their ignorance and without waiting for apology or permission. Maya grabs her stethoscope from the gutter, wipes it with the hem of her coat, and jumps into her car tires, screeching as she speeds toward the scene. the police scrambling to follow in their cruiser, and when she arrives, it's chaos. A man bleeding out from a knife wound to the abdomen, another woman clutching a child whose small arm is slick with blood, bystanders panicked and scattered. Maya moves like lightning barking orders to the first officer on scene, using a belt as a tourniquet, applying pressure to the man's wound. Finding a pulse, and somewhere in the distance the same officers who had arrested her just minutes before are now watching stunned and speechless as she kneels in the blood-streaked plaza, bare hands deep in the chest of a dying man, saving him with the skill and precision of someone who's done this too many times to count. And when the paramedics arrive, they don't question her. They know her, they respect her, and one of them shouts, "Dr. Jefferson." Thank God, as they wheel away the stabilized patient, and finally, she stands wiping her hands on her pants, the blood smearing with rainwater. Her face drawn but fierce as she walks back toward the officers who stand now with wide eyes and open mouths, no longer smug, no longer amused, and one of them stammers, "Doctor, I'm sorry," but she cuts him off with a look sharp and calm. "Your apology doesn't stop the bleeding," she says, and they flinch as if wounded, and she continues, "One day you'll learn to see people before you judge them, because next time the cost of your prejudice might be someone's life." Then she turns away, shoulders square, stepping back into the ambulance with the child she'd stabilized, cradled gently in her arms, and the door slams shut behind her, leaving the officers alone with the weight of what they've done. The rain still falling like judgment from the heavens and the bystanders. Those who had watched silently now begin to murmur, some filming again, but this time not to capture brutality, but redemption, a reckoning. And later that night the video of the cuffs being removed of Maya saving lives in a storm of blood and sirens goes viral, captioned only with, "They humiliated her, then begged her to save them." And across the nation people begin to talk not just about Maya Jefferson, but about what it means to assume, to label, to dismiss. And Maya, who returns to the hospital before dawn with bruised wrists and a quiet fury behind her eyes, walks through those doors, not with shame, but with the unshakable dignity of a woman who turned injustice into purpose because she knows this fight is far from over, and every life she saves is a victory, not just against death, but against the ignorance that nearly silenced her. And in the quiet that follows the chaos, she stands taller than she ever has not, because they finally saw her worth, but because she never needed their permission to have it. But the story does not end with the ambulance doors closing and the flashing lights fading into the night. It begins anew the moment Dr. Maya Jefferson walks into the ER, her scrubs still stained with blood, her knuckles raw, her shoulders tense from holding together more than just flesh and bone. She is holding together the weight of a system that tried to collapse her spirit, and as she steps through the automatic doors, nurses glance up and freeze, some recognizing her from the video already circulating online, their phones buzzing with texts and reposts of that moment, the moment a woman they've always known to be quiet, methodical, and compassionate stood her ground in the storm, and became a symbol not because she asked for it, but because the truth can no longer be denied. She moves past them with a nod, straight to the locker room, where she changes into clean scrubs, rinses the dried blood from her hands, and stares at her own reflection in the mirror. Dark circles beneath her eyes, the faint line of a bruise across her cheek from when her face was pressed to the pavement. And yet there is no defeat there, only defiance, the kind that comes from survival from standing when they tried to push you down. And As she ties her hair back again and steps out, she finds Chief of Surgery Dr. Evelyn Moore, a sharp, white-haired woman who has mentored Maya since her intern days, waiting by the nurse's station holding a printout of the incident report in one hand and her phone in the other. Face unreadable, until she says, "I saw the footage, they're going to want a statement," and Maya's jaw clenches, not in fear, but in certainty. "Then I'll give them one," she replies quietly. And over the next few days, the hospital schedules a press conference, not because they want to capitalize on her pain, but because the public demands answers. And when Maya steps to the podium flanked by her hospital colleagues, her stethoscope once again draped over her neck, not as a symbol, but as a badge of earned purpose. She doesn't read from notes, she speaks from the wound. "I wasn't just humiliated," she says, voice steady and unflinching. "I was dehumanized, and had that radio call come seconds later, someone might have died because 2 officers didn't believe a black woman could be a doctor." And the crowd is silent. The cameras clicking, broadcasting her words into homes and headlines as she continues. "I don't tell you this for pity. I tell you this because it cannot happen again to anyone." And she finishes not with blame, but with a challenge. We have to do better. Not just in the streets, but in our hearts. We cannot keep equating skin color with suspicion. Lives depend on it. The press conference explodes online, shared across platforms and morning shows, and soon national outlets ask her to appear. But Maya declines most interviews, choosing instead to speak at schools, hospitals, and police academies, where she tells her story not to shame, but to educate. And in one of those sessions in a crowded auditorium filled with young police cadets, she raises her wrist and shows them the faint scar left by the handcuffs and says, "This is what silence looks like. Don't ever let your silence become someone else's scar." And in the crowd, there's a young black girl in uniform who grips her own badge a little tighter, realizing maybe she can change things from within. Meanwhile, the 2 officers involved in Maya's detainment are placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. But what shocks the department is Maya's decision not to pursue legal action when asked why she responds. Because accountability means more than punishment. "I want transformation," and instead, she agrees to meet them face to face in a closed-door community forum organized by the mayor, where the officers no longer in uniform sit across from her, visibly shaken remorse, carved into the lines of their posture, as they apologize not just to her, but to every person they've judged too quickly. And Maya listens, arms crossed, but eyes open. And when she finally speaks, it is not with venom, but with clarity. "You don't have to fear people like me. You just have to see us," and they nod, not defensively, but humbly, perhaps for the first time, truly understanding the gravity of what they've done. In the months that follow, Maya collaborates with the city council to implement mandatory racial bias training for law enforcement that includes real scenarios, including hers. And she helps draft legislation called the Jefferson Protocol, a statewide policy requiring officers to verify professional credentials before detainment. When offered a small but significant shield against blind prejudice, back at the hospital, Maya returns to her OR not as an activist, but as herself, a surgeon, a teacher, a protector. And though the world now knows her name, she hasn't changed who she is, only expanded what she stands for. And one quiet evening as she exits the hospital, after a long shift, she finds a letter taped to her windshield. No name, just handwriting that reads, "Thank you for saving my father. I'm studying to become a doctor now, too." Maya smiles softly, pressing the note to her chest as the sun sets behind the city skyline. And in that golden hush, she realizes that the legacy of what happened doesn't end in the pain it lives on, in the change in the conversations sparked in the systems reevaluated in every young girl of color who walks into a science class and dares to dream beyond the barriers placed before her. Because Maya Jefferson wasn't just humiliated. She became a mirror to society, and when the world was forced to look, it saw both its failure and its hope. And as she walks to her car that night, keys in hand and purpose in stride, she knows this. They may have tried to bring her down to the pavement, but they only grounded her in something stronger truth. But as the seasons shift and the headlines fade, Dr. Maya Jefferson feels the lingering weight of what the world doesn't see, the quiet battles that continue behind closed doors, the subtle glances from new patients who still hesitate when she enters the room, the well-meaning colleagues who now walk on eggshells around her, unsure how to speak to a woman who has become both a national symbol and a personal discomfort. And though her name has sparked panels, op-eds, and university seminars, Maya wakes each morning not with pride but with a resolve that aches as deeply as it empowers. She still walks into trauma bays, soaked in blood, and screams, still holds the hands of mothers losing sons, still whispers calm into the eyes of the dying. But now, every moment feels like it matters more because she knows someone is always watching, waiting to decide if she fits the mold of what a savior should look like. At night, when the house is quiet and the city hums like a distant ocean, she rereads letters from strangers, black nurses who were told their braids were unprofessional, young boys suspended for questioning authority, a white father whose mixed daughter clutched his hand crying after watching Maya's video whispering, "Will, that happened to me too, Daddy." And in those letters, Maya feels both burden and blessing, a strange duality of being seen and being used as proof as protest, as hope, and sometimes as a shield for people still unwilling to change. But then comes the invitation. Harvard Medical School guest lecturer for a special symposium titled Medicine and Bias Healing Beyond the Operating Room. The email is respectful, but Maya hesitates. She's not sure if she wants to speak anymore, not in front of rooms filled with privilege dressed in curiosity. But then she remembers the girl in uniform who sat in the front row during the police academy session. Eyes blazing like twin torches, Maya accepts. On the day of the lecture, she walks into the grand auditorium, polished oak marble columns, students and professors seated in tears of anticipation. But Maya doesn't step behind the podium. Instead, she walks to the center of the stage, microphone clipped to her collar, and holds up a photograph. It's not of her face, bruised on the pavement. It's of a child, a small boy named Raphael, whom she saved weeks ago after a bus crash when no one else could stop the bleeding in time. This, she says, her voice soft but echoing, is why I became a doctor. Not to prove anything, not to inspire or perform, but because life is sacred and I'm trained to protect it. Then she turns to the audience, her eyes scanning them. Not for admiration, but for sincerity. But imagine if I hadn't made it that night, if those officers had kept me detained, Raphael would have died, and you'd never know his name. That's what bias does. It erases futures before they begin. The room is silent, not out of politeness, but because something inside each listener has shifted. After the lecture, a professor, an older white man with tenure and clout, approaches her with tears in his eyes and says, "I've taught medicine for 30 years. Today, I finally understood what it means to heal." Maya nods once, no thanks needed. The truth is its own reward. That evening, she visits her mother's grave for the first time in months, brings fresh lilies, sits cross-legged in the grass, and speaks aloud into the fading light. Mama, they tried to break me, but they didn't. And now they're listening. She closes her eyes, letting the wind move through her fingers like memory. But I'm not done. Not even close. In the following months, Maya co-founds an initiative called the Second Look Project, which places trauma surgeons, social workers, and community advocates into underfunded neighborhoods, not as saviors, but as neighbors. She doesn't make headlines for this. She doesn't need to change. She's learned happens in boardrooms and schoolyards, but most of all in the silence of people who finally choose to speak. And one afternoon, as Maya walks through a community clinic, her team helped establish a little girl tugs on her white coat. The girl's hair is braided in tiny beads, her cheeks round with hope. "Are you a real doctor?" she asks, eyes wide with wonder. Maya kneels down, her stethoscope glinting in the sun. "Yes, sweetheart," she says. "And one day you can be too." The girl smiles, then runs back to her mother, who mouths a thank you with trembling lips. Maya stands, watches them go, and feels something deep and quiet unfurl in her chest. Not justice, not vengeance. Legacy. And as the city breathes around her, sirens in the distance, laughter in the park, buses hissing to a stop. Maya Jefferson keeps walking forward, not because she's unafraid, but because she knows exactly who she is now. Not just a doctor, not just a survivor, but a force that will not be forgotten, a voice that will not be silenced, and a reminder that even in the darkest moments dignity is not given. It is kept, months pass, but the fire in Dr. Maya Jefferson does not dim, it evolves. What began as a wound has become a purpose, a pulse that drives her beyond the operating room, beyond the camera flashes into the marrow of real change. She's no longer just treating patients. She's diagnosing a nation, cutting into its silence, exposing truths buried under years of comfortable denial. She spends her mornings at the hospital, saving lives with hands steadier than ever, and her afternoons in community roundtables, courtroom hearings, and schools where young black girls watch her not with awe, but with recognition. They see themselves in her. And for the first time she sees herself in them too, not as someone who made it out, but someone who made it through and stayed to hold the door open behind her. One morning she receives an unexpected letter. It's on thick, cream-colored paper with the official seal of the Department of Justice. They're inviting her to serve on a federal advisory panel on racial equity in emergency care. It's historic. Never before has someone like Maya, young black female, unafraid, been asked to shape the rules that once failed her. She accepts, but not with glee. She knows this is not a reward. It is a responsibility. In Washington, during the panel's first closed-door meeting, surrounded by men in tailored suits and women who speak in carefully calculated terms, Maya leans in and says, "This country doesn't need more diversity statements. It needs systems that can't breathe without justice." Her words silence the room, but they ripple. And weeks later, when the panel recommends sweeping changes to how law enforcement interacts with medical professionals in the field, including funding mobile trauma units for underserved communities, her fingerprints are on every line. Still, the work is never done. One winter night, snow clinging to the edges of the street. Maya is driving home when she sees a crowd gathered near a gas station. She slows down, something in her bones, alert. She sees a young black man no more than 20 on the ground, surrounded by officers. His chest is rising too fast, one hand clutching his side. She pulls over, grabs her kit, pushes through the crowd. One officer blocks her path. "Ma'am, please step back." She levels him with a look. Calm, unmoving. "I'm Dr. Maya Jefferson. He's going into shock." Move, this time no one stops her. She kneels beside the boy. Applies pressure. Assesses the wound. Calls instructions to the ambulance over her shoulder. The boy is fading. His lips blue. "Stay with me," she whispers. "You're not leaving me tonight." And when the ambulance arrives, she rides with him, holding his hand until they reach the ER. He survives. And days later, his mother finds Maya in the hospital chapel lighting a candle. She walks up, tears brimming. "They said you saved him." The woman says, "They didn't tell me who you were until I saw the news. I just... Thank you." Maya turns a soft smile on her lips. He saved himself. I just reminded his body how to fight. That night, Maya goes home to a quiet apartment where a single-framed photograph hangs above her desk. It's her and her mother decades ago, sitting on a couch, both of them smiling wide. Her mother's arm is wrapped around her like armor. Maya lights another candle and whispers, "I'm still here. Mama." The light flickers outside. The city breathes. And far across town, in a third-grade classroom, a little girl draws a picture of a black woman in a white coat with a red cape stethoscope around her neck. She labels it Dr. Maya the Brave. The teacher asks, "Is she a superhero?" The girl replies, "No, she's real." And so she is, more real than the titles they gave her, more real than the chains they tried to wrap around her dignity. Doctor Maya Jefferson walks forward every step, a legacy, every breath a revolution in motion, because she is no longer proving her worth. She is rewriting the meaning of power, and the world, whether it's ready or not, is following Ring, arrives with a quiet strength. And so does Dr. Maya. Jefferson changed, but not softened. The city blooms around her like a reluctant apology trees, lining the sidewalk she once walked in. Handcuffs now shower her with blossoms, as if to honor what they tried to bury. She no longer flinches when she sees police cars. Instead, they nod first. Her name, once whispered in private shame, is now etched into the architecture of change. Schools hold assemblies in her honor. Hospitals revise bias training protocols with her lectures as mandatory curriculum, and civil rights leaders begin to refer to her as a bridge between two worlds, the scalpel and the street. Yet, beneath the accolades, Maya remains anchored in the pulse of real work. She spends Thursdays at the Second Look Community Clinic she helped build in the city's most neglected neighborhood, a place where grandmothers come in with swollen ankles, and shy teenagers ask quiet questions about futures they thought were too distant to imagine. One Thursday, a boy named Jalen walks in, 16 tall, tense, wounded. Not physically, but in the way he carries his body like he expects to be punished just for breathing. He's been skipping school, failing classes. His foster mother brought him in after he punched a hole in the wall during a panic attack. Maya doesn't ask questions at first. She just listens. And when he finally speaks about his father being killed in a wrongful raid, about the silence no one dared break. She sits still, then slowly says, "They told me once that people like us weren't supposed to survive. But I didn't just survive, I showed up. That's how you win Jalen, not with fists, with presence." He looks away ashamed. "But I'm angry all the time." She nods. Then let's use it. Anger isn't the enemy. It's fuel. Let me teach you how to carry it without letting it burn you from the inside. She connects him with a counselor, later with a scholarship foundation. But most of all, she tells him the truth. You are not broken. You are becoming. The weeks turn to months, and the city begins preparing for its annual Unity Parade. An event that, for the first time in its 75-year history, invites Dr. Maya Jefferson to be Grand Marshal. The theme, Honor in Healing. At first, Maya hesitates. She doesn't like stages, she prefers emergency rooms and difficult conversations. But her staff insists, this one's for the kids, let them see you, and so. On a sunlit Saturday, Maya rides atop a slow-moving convertible surrounded by marching bands. Dancers, fire trucks, and most importantly, faces like hers. Children nurses, young, black doctors, activists, teachers, survivors. The crowd erupts when she passes, not just because she's famous, but because she's familiar. She's theirs. A woman leans out from the crowd, holding a sign that reads, "You saved my brother. You saved us." Maya places a hand over her heart and nods. Her eyes glisten at the end of the route. Cameras flash. Reporters call out questions. One asks Dr. Jefferson, "How do you want to be remembered?" She pauses, thinks, then replies, "I don't. I want the world to change so much that no one ever has to be me again." That night, she sits alone in her kitchen with a glass of tea and a medical journal in her lap. But her eyes are not on the pages, they are on the future. She's drafting a proposal to create a national mentorship program for minority youth in medicine. One that doesn't just help them pass exams, but teaches them how to walk through rooms that were never built for them with their heads unbowed. Her phone buzzes. It's Jalen. A photo. He's smiling, holding his report card, all A's. The caption reads, "I showed up." Maya smiles wide, a tear sliding down her cheek, not from pain but from recognition. This is the victory. Not a parade, not a panel, but one life rerouted toward hope. And as the moonlight pours in across her kitchen table, Dr. Maya Jefferson breathes deep, closes the journal, and says softly into the quiet, "Let's keep going, because the world may try to forget, but she will not let it. As long as she breathes, the story continues, not just hers, but the stories of every silenced voice, every overlooked child, every bruised soul still waiting for someone to see them, not as a threat, not as a label, but as a life worth saving. And Maya, she'll be there, ready with open hands, steady eyes, and a voice that now echoes far beyond the walls of any hospital. A voice that says, 'You are not invisible, and I will not let you be erased.'" Summer rolls in heavy with heat and expectation. But for Dr. Maya Jefferson, the real fire burns from within. Invitations flood her inbox, daily TV interviews, honorary degrees, even a proposal to write a memoir. But she turns most of them down. Her story is not meant to be polished for profit or trimmed into digestible sound bites. She is not interested in becoming a symbol frozen in time. Maya wants motion forward, upward, deeper. She pours herself into the Second Look project, expanding its reach to rural clinics and juvenile detention centers. She personally oversees the creation of trauma-informed care workshops for school counselors, knowing too well how early the wounds of injustice begin. One sweltering Friday, Maya stands before a group of young girls at a community summer camp. They sit cross-legged in the shade of a sycamore tree, sweaty but wide-eyed, watching her like she holds the secret to becoming whole. She doesn't lecture them about medicine. Instead, she holds up her hands, scarred precise brown, and says, These hands save lives. But first, they had to learn how to protect me. A girl in the front, maybe 8 years old, raises her hand. Did it hurt when they put you on the ground? The question lands like a pebble in a still lake. Maya kneels, meeting her at eye level. Yes, she says softly. It hurt in places I didn't know could ache. But I stood back up, and that's what I want you to remember. Even when the world pushes you down, stand. The girl nods, somewhere. Maya sees her younger self reflected in that nod, and it tightens something in her chest. That night, she sits on her balcony with the city pulsing below, watching the skyline like it's breathing. She thinks about legacy, not the kind chiseled into marble or gilded on hospital plaques, but the kind passed hand to hand, soul to soul in small rooms where someone finally believes they matter. Her phone vibrates. A news alert. Another incident. A young black EMT detained at gunpoint in the middle of a call. Maya doesn't blink. She's already dialing. Within hours, she's on a plane. Not as a celebrity, not even as a doctor, but as a witness, a guardian, a living rebuke to systems that still haven't learned. She meets the EMT's family, advocates for him publicly, lobbies for emergency response identification reforms. Days later, when the charges are dropped and the apology issued, Maya says to the press, "I won't celebrate justice when it arrives late and only after pressure. I want a world where no one has to film their own dignity to prove it's real." Her words trend again. But she doesn't check the hashtags. She's too busy in the background building the next thing. The Maya Jefferson Fellowship, a fully funded medical prep program for first-generation students of color, with full housing mentorship and emotional wellness care. The waiting list fills in under a week. Her name begins to appear in conversations once reserved for icons: Claudia, Thomas, Rebecca, Lee, Crumpler, Maya Jefferson. But she shrugs it off. Titles are easy. Doing the work is hard, and she is here for the hard things. One evening, as the sun dips low and golden across the clinic's dusty windows, Maya receives a visit from an unlikely figure. Officer Carter. One of the two who had thrown her to the ground that night long ago. He stands nervously in the waiting room. Cap in hand, not in uniform. No badge. Just a man who's spent years with a weight on his chest, Dr. Jefferson. He begins, voice cracked. "I've been in therapy. I've stepped down from field work. I speak now. To cadets about what I did, about what it cost." Maya studies him, her face unreadable. "And what did it cost you?" she asks. "My certainty," he says quietly. "My ignorance, the illusion that good intentions could excuse blind action." "You changed that." A pause. Then he reaches into his coat and hands her a folded letter. "It's from my daughter. She saw you speak at her school." Maya opens it later alone. In crayon, it reads, "Dear Dr. Maya, I want to be a doctor like you and help people even if they don't look like me. My daddy says you're brave and right. I think so too." Maya exhales, a long, trembling breath. Not because she forgives, but because she understands. Some healing isn't clean. Some healing scars. But it still heals. That weekend, she visits her old neighborhood, the corner store, where her mother used to buy frozen orange juice. The mural someone painted of her on the side of the library cape, and all. She smiles at it, then walks on. She stops at a local rec center where a free health fair she helped fund is buzzing with families. Children laughing, parents asking questions, volunteers guiding with care. She sees Jalen there, now 17, helping an elderly woman fill out a form. He catches her eye, gives her a grin. Told you I'd show up. He calls, she laughs. Keep showing up. As the sky darkens and lanterns flicker on above the fair, Maya stands in the middle of it all, not in scrubs, not on a stage, not behind a camera, just herself, fully seen, fully standing. And as music plays in the distance and joy fills the air like balm on an old bruise, she whispers to no one and everyone, "This is how we rise, and the world's still broken, but now watching rises with her autumn rolls in, with crisp winds and rust-colored leaves blanketing the city in gold. But Dr. Maya Jefferson's fire does not cool. If anything, it sharpens. The chill in the air reminds her of that cold night years ago when the pavement met her cheek and Prejudice wore a badge. But now the city bears her name not in whispers, but in street signs and scholarship banners. Jefferson Youth Medical Academy opens its doors that October. A sleek, glass-walled building near the same plaza where she once saved a life with blood on her hands and fury in her voice. At the ribbon-cutting children line up in white coats, 2 sizes too big, some holding stethoscopes, some gripping their parents' hands. Maya watches them with a lump in her throat, knowing that every stone in this foundation was laid with pain. She refused to waste. During her speech, she doesn't talk about herself. She talks about the kids who were never given a fair start, the genius that gets ignored because it's dressed in poverty, the future leaders who won't have to fight to be seen anymore. Her voice cracks when she says, "I built this not because I wanted the world to remember what happened to me, but because I wanted you to remember what you're capable of becoming." The crowd erupts. Her mother's old friend Miss Clarice, now in a wheelchair, dabs her eyes and murmurs. She's turned her wounds into a blueprint. That night, Maya returns to the hospital not because she has to, but because she chooses to. There's a young woman on the operating table. A gunshot wound through the rib cage. Maya's hands don't tremble. She doesn't flinch at the blood. She works like a storm fast, precise, full of fury and grace. After hours of surgery, the girl survives. Later, her mother comes to Maya weeping, hugging her like family. "They said you were famous," she whispers, "but you made time for my baby." Maya smiles. They'll know her name too. One day, in the weeks that follow, Maya is contacted by a filmmaker. A woman, black, brilliant, soft-spoken, who wants to make a documentary. Not about the viral moment, but about what comes after healing system change. The quiet victories. Maya hesitates. "The world's seen enough of me." But the filmmaker replies, "They haven't seen you on your terms, so they begin." Cameras follow her through surgeries, council meetings, classrooms, and lonely walks home. They catch her laughing with nurses, confronting officials, mentoring young girls, hugging strangers, and sometimes just sitting alone, watching the horizon. No narration, just truth raw, unfiltered real. When the film debuts the following spring, it does not trend. It transforms. Viewers write in from all over the country. "I cried. I changed careers. I talked to my son about race for the first time." Maya receives thousands of letters, but one catches her breath. It's from a white police officer in Montana retired. He writes, "I once stopped a man just like you were stopped. I never apologized, but watching you. I see now, I'm sorry, I'm trying to be better before I'm gone." She folds the letter carefully and puts it in a drawer with the others. Not trophies, but reminders. Each one a heartbeat. Each one proof that even the most stubborn roots of injustice can be unearthed with truth. One shovel of light at a time. On the anniversary of her detainment, Maya returns to the same street corner. No press, no crowd, just her. She places a small candle on the sidewalk and kneels not in grief but in gratitude. She whispers, "Thank you for breaking me. You didn't realize I was a seed." Then she stands. That night, the city council votes unanimously to name that corner Jefferson Crossing. They install a bronze plaque beneath the lamp post in honor of Dr. Maya Jefferson, who turned pain into purpose and made the world safer by refusing to stay silent. Children take field trips there. Now, teachers tell her story not as a tragedy, but as a triumph. A woman who was thrown down but built something greater from the dust, and as the leaves fall and the cold returns, Maya walks through the corridors of her clinic with the calm of someone who no longer carries the weight of being enough. She knows she is. She always was. And the world, finally, is learning to catch up. Years pass, but the name Dr. Maya Jefferson never fades. It grows not as a fleeting headline, but as a living movement. The children she once mentored now wear their own white coats. Former skeptics become allies. Systems begin to shift slowly, painfully, but surely because one woman refused to be defined by humiliation and instead defined a new future. Her story is taught in classrooms now, not as a tale of injustice, but as a blueprint for resistance, for transformation, for healing. Maya no longer needs to fight to be heard. Her silence carries weight. Her presence changes rooms. On the 10th anniversary of the night she was wrongfully detained, the entire city pauses. Sirens go silent at 8:03 p.m., the exact minute the cuffs clicked shut and candles line the sidewalks in every borough. But Maya doesn't watch the coverage. She's inside the trauma center saving another life because that's who she is. Not a symbol. Not a savior. A servant of life. A builder of justice. A guardian of dignity. And when she walks home that night alone under the city's soft glow, she stops beneath the street sign that now bears her name. She closes her eyes. The wind carries voices. Voices of girls who once thought they were invisible, of boys who nearly gave up, of elders who thought change was impossible. And they all whisper the same thing because of you. I believe again. She opens her eyes, smiles. The story is not over. The story is ours now. If this story moved you, if you believe in justice and healing, in turning pain into purpose, then join us. Subscribe to our channel, where voices like Dr. Maya Jefferson's are not just heard but honored. We tell real stories that inspire action, stories that reflect the truth of our communities, our struggles, and our strength. Hit the subscribe button, turn on notifications, and share this video with someone who needs to be reminded. We are never too broken to rise. Your support helps us keep telling stories that matter. Be part of the change. Be part of the movement. Subscribe now